How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I've got a very special guest for you all. Some may say the king of the deadlift, pulling a mind-blowing 487.5 kilos at the American Pro this year. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Danny Grigsby. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, bro. Thanks for having me on. I always like talking about anything, honestly. I mean, this kind of stuff's fun to me, just to talk to like-minded people and just, learn more about each other or whatever the topic may be.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. I know we were chatting a little bit beforehand, but how are you? What's been happening in your world recently?
Not much. I've been deep in the off season, so training's kind of been very, you know how it is, like very monotonous, but it's what you need to do. I've just been focused on my job. For those that don't know, I'm in the United States Marine Corps. I've been in 7 years. I'm gonna get out about a year from now, next October. But I'm on the funeral detail team, so I go to it's called Arlington National Cemetery in the U.S. It's one of the more prestigious military cemeteries. So I do casket and cremation funerals there for past Marines and their family members. So it's a good gig. You give back in a great way, and it's very fulfilling. So.
Yeah, oh, nice. And especially, I know you've touched on it a little bit there, but we see the lifts that you pull, and you've mentioned a little bit of background to yourself there, obviously being in the Marines. Just want to give anyone listening who might not know your background, how you got involved in strength training and powerlifting. Just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to do that. So I would I technically started powerlifting in 2013, so it's 9 going on 10 years now. Growing up, I did football, basketball, baseball, and track and field. I did all those for probably 6 to 8 years apiece in different early on and then late in my childhood. I did up to a year of college football, so I stopped football at 19. And then for 6, 8 months, I was just working out, just kind of no specific type of training, kind of like bro training. And then there was a powerlifting meet at the gym I was at, so I just did it for fun, no real expectation. I got hooked on it from there because it was just I've always been used to doing an athletic endeavor of some sort most of my life, so it was a good way to still be competitive after realizing football wasn't for me anymore. So, and I've been doing it ever since. I mean, so 2013 is when I started powerlifting. I joined the Marines late 2015, so I've been doing it ever since then. It's hard to juggle sometimes because this is the most common thing I get is how do people juggle both? And to an extent, you're going to have to compromise because if you're doing extreme amounts of endurance training, for years I didn't really improve because at one of the units I was at, we'd run 10, 12 miles a week. So
Wow.
to think you can improve in the beginning if you're just getting into it, but like once you're at an intermediate advanced level, trying to increase your squat and deadlift when you're running like 2, 3 miles a day, yeah, that wasn't happening. But
Yeah.
luckily, I'm in a better situation now. Since I'm with because I'm actually a filtration specialist. That's my actual MOS.
Yeah.
But since 2020, I've been in Washington D.C. and it's kind of like a temporary billet. I'm with the body bear, so we don't run as much here because we got to be bigger to carry the caskets. Thank God. So yeah.
Oh, cool. And with that, obviously having your first competition in 2013, was there a point where sort of in your progression, getting to that, intermediate and like, the advanced elite level that you're at now, was there a turning point where, you took it maybe a little bit more seriously or, the change in mindset towards it? Because, it sounds as though catching the powerlifting bug, you still enjoy it. But was there a point where there was maybe a transition where it's like, oh no, actually, I need to take it a little bit more seriously, if you like?
Yeah, I think probably I might mix the year up. I think it was around 2019 because at that time I was squatting low 700s. I was benching like 360 and deadlifting like low to mid eights. And up to that point, I kind of was just lifting by feel, not really. I would have programs, but I wouldn't do a lot of stuff on it. But once I got after that, I was like, well, I realized I was going to have to put in more work, be more structured if I wanted to improve. So I'd say from 2019 going into 2020, that's when I really stepped it up. And a lot of it too was the changing in my surroundings. Like I said, going from not having to run as much, which in turn improved my recovery, and just trying to figure out more, especially bench. Because for years, I'm not gonna lie, I just was like, fuck bench. You know, who no one's gonna care because of my deadlift. But then especially the last 2 years, I'm getting really competitive in the total. So I was like, man, I'm not gonna be the best at bench, but I gotta be on par with everyone. So that by the time I go into deads, I'm not dealing with a 200-300 pound deficit from the subtotal, you know. So that was definitely the turning point for me. And you know, my goal is always to be more gradual. So it's good to have you know what they say, grand goals. But it's like every meet, periodically, I'm trying to add, you know, between 2 and 5 kilos to my squat and 2 to 3 kilos to my bench. Realistically, some meets it's been more, but I'd rather, even if I have more in the tank, you know, presumably, I'd rather do that. So then it's like you have momentum, you've improved, but you already know going into the off season, you have a good starting point because you didn't go all out at the meet, you know, because let's say I go all out and everything, well, it's going to take a lot more to get stronger in that sense than if I just, and I don't want to say conservative, like I still hit PRs,
Yeah.
but I had a little in the tank, but in a full meet you can't, especially since deadlift's my best lift. It's like people always say, oh, you like in my last meet I squatted 770, and people are like, oh, you could have done like 804 on squat, and I was like maybe, but like that extra fatigue, is it really like me getting an extra 10-12 kilos on squat if it were to completely wreck me going into deads, where obviously that makes up way more of my total. So it's like a fine line. I mean, I've noticed if you're a great squatter, then obviously you push squat because that's your money maker, right?
Yeah.
So it's all dependent on the type of lifter you are. Ideally, we want to be above average or elite in all of them, but unfortunately, it's just very few people are like that. So I've kind of learned, okay, I'm a good deadlifter. My bench is getting up there. I did 459. Next meet, I want like 470 ish. And then I feel like I'm above average squatter. And I tell people this, like, oh, you're really good. But like people who don't know powerlifting, they don't understand that, like, the standards, you know? Because to an average person, you know, that's 700-pound squat's great, but competing at 275, I mean, a lot of guys are squatting over 800 now. So, you know, to try to just be on par, I got to be pushing 800. That's
Yeah.
definitely my goal right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because if you're just pushing every lift all the time, especially on competition day, you're doing all three, that deadlifts at the end, you're going to be fatigued from there. In terms of your sort of influences on your training, or people that you've learned from or you go to advise, because obviously the level that you compete at, people think, oh right, so who do you learn from, or ask for advice? Who have been kind of your influences throughout your training and lifting?
Well, it's kind of different now, because now a lot of times people, they love to reach out on social media, but back then, like 2013 to 2017, I never personally reached out to me, but the people I would, like, I guess, get motivation from were obviously Dan Green. You know, it's like every 5 years a new set of, like, I don't know, lifters kind of recycle. So half the people probably don't even know who Dan Green is, but Dan Green, obviously, because he was like one of the bigger Americans during that time. I like Chris Duffin too, because I'm from Oregon, so, and Chris Duffin's also from Oregon, so he was the most legit powerlifter from Oregon, and back even till now, Oregon doesn't have a huge powerlifting. How do I say it? Like I lived in California for a few years, and now on the East Coast, both those places, you can find meets multiple times a month. You know,
Right.
there's a lot of great powerlifters in one space, but in Oregon, it's not like that. I mean, there's a few guys, who are kind of up there. So Chris Duff was kind of motivation because he was a Northwest guy, and I wanted to be the next great. This was before I joined the Marines, but I wanted to be the next great powerlifter in the Northwest, Oregon, and Washington. And other than that, it was kind of just, I'd say those two guys, and then obviously all the people I trained with and coached with. It's kind of like I take little things from everybody I've trained with and met. You know, if I've seen someone train a certain way, I'll like think about it, maybe experiment. Like I've tried, for instance, I deadlift once a week currently. I bench twice a week, and I squat once a week. I've squatted twice a week, benched 3 times a week, tried deadlifting twice a week, and that was probably the worst experiment for me, at least, because I think if you're gonna do something like that, you have to start off very small and gradual. Because
Yeah.
I'm already at a high level on deadlift, so implementing a second day, even at lightweights, me still doing 500, 600, 650, that's still, and I don't think I need that because, use a lot of the same muscles in squat. And for 3 months, I did conventional in the off season, so I mixed it up in that way. And now I'm starting to transition back to sumo because I have a meet in March I'm going to do. So I'm about 5, 6 weeks from prep. So just getting back to the hang of sumo. But yeah, everybody's different with, I think ultimately it's a part of obviously how you train, your genetics. Because I'm in the firm belief, like if you're more fast twitch, I feel like I'm very fast twitch. Like everything I do, like even when I do accessories, I want to be very aggressive. I want to be, it's more natural to me to be explosive. Like if I try to slow something down, it just feels very, now I've learned to do that because I don't want to, I'd rather do moderate weight and feel the muscle, mind muscle connection than do twice as much weight and just like I mean, you want to be explosive in certain aspects, but you don't need to do everything. I don't think you need to do everything very explosive.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's crazy because you can see so many points of view throughout social media, and nobody's really wrong if you want to argue that. It's all based on the individual and what your specific needs might be for training volume and frequency and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. It's got to be based on what's going to work for you. On a little bit of a tangent, how much how much of a difference is there between your conventional and your sumo? How do you find, or how have you found swapping between the two?
So the heaviest I went conventional during my little block was 816. I think if I were to do it during a meet prep, I could get over 9. I'd probably say 900. I mean, that's, people still think I would be oppressive, but like, I mean, it's just, you got to understand, like the last 2 years, it's becoming like a meme to make fun of sumo, right? Because it's like it's a trend, and people know if they make some stupid meme about sumo, they know it's going to blow up. They're going to get likes and traction. So every time there's a trend, anybody will just hop on it because they know, hey, if I want to get exposure, everyone's posting about this, so I'll just post about it too. But obviously, I mean, no shit, right? Of course, I'm better. Like people tell me sometimes, they're like, "Oh, so you're better sumo?" I'm like, no shit, I'm better sumo. It's like in powerlifting, you're gonna do the one you're better at because you don't get. I mean, if I got brownie points for doing conventional, maybe I'll do conventional, but it's never been how it is. But it's just a lot of those people don't compete or they don't understand just how powerlifting works. I mean, yeah, I mean, I pulled 1070, and on a great day, if I trained it for like 6 months, I could probably get low 900s conventional, which to me would still be pretty good because I never even thought I'd do that. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just a constant. And then people like Jamal. Jamal's so close, it's crazy. He could
Mm,
conventional 950 and pull 1,000 sumo. But I think a big part of that is because his stance is closer, and it's not the same thing. But like when your stance is closer, it's a lot more similar to conventional. So
yeah,
like it's not a drastic difference to him. I feel when he does both, it's just like he even said, like the reason he doesn't do conventional at full meet is because if you're low bar and benching, your back's already going to be fried or fatigued in some way. So doing conventional where you're slightly more over the bar, I mean, you're more likely to get smoked. And that's why I feel, at least in the past, a lot of the great conventional deadlifters they would do it at deadlift only because doing it in a full meet is like my first few meets. I did conventional the first 2, 3 years I powerlifted. Yeah, that's what I remember most is how destroyed my back would be doing squat, bench, and then conventional. Like it's just a lot to try to handle all at
yeah.
once.
I
But
think that.
everybody's different. I mean, so.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to say on there, I think especially for a lot of people listening who might be getting in there first, or I've got a couple of powerlifting competitions underneath the belt, I think that comes with experience, being able to get those strategies in place for competition day and realizing, when to push and the blocks of training to do from there. Obviously, with your deadlift as well and the recovery side of things, obviously being in a position now where not running as much, how do you balance your training and your recovery? Because especially the weights for your deadlift, must take it out of you. How do you balance your recovery? What are kind of your strategies or go-tos?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So I'll kind of dive into it from multiple perspectives. So the biggest thing I've learned too, and I kind of learned this last prep somewhat, is like I have a tendency to not push squat. I tend to wait a little too late to try to push squat to prep for a meet because it's really tough. Because once I start, it's almost like I have to alternate weeks because if I'm going to do a heavier week, whether weight or heavier frequency or volume on deadlift, trying to trying to match that with an equally heavy squat, it just I've made it work sometimes, but that's the big part of recovery is knowing, okay, this week, if I'm deadlifting this, I might do a variation of squat or I might lessen the weight and get the stimulus another way. But it's really hard to push both at the same time, in my opinion. Some people, like I said, can make some people don't have a problem, but that's one thing I've come across. And then recovery, one thing I got recently a few months ago, I wish I would have had this last prep, was I got a CPAP. So I have a bigger neck and I think I'm I'm normally low 260s now. Well, I get to over 270 when I have to make 308, but everyone is different. But like my sleep doctor said, she said once you're a 17 or 18-inch neck, that's when you could be susceptible to sleep apnea.
Right.
And that's helped me a lot. Now, obviously, I'll really figure out how much it helps me when I start pushing maximal weights again. I haven't done that since the meet, but CPAP, and you don't even need to be big. They told me because depending on like your jaw structure and how your throat's formed, you could be like sub 200 pounds and you could arguably still need a CPAP. So it's not
Right.
just about because I thought it was fat. I thought it was if you were morbidly obese because
Yeah.
that's you always see fat people wearing them or big strong man, but like yeah, CPAP because the way they told me it, it's like they joke they're like people like with I have mild sleep apnea. I don't have severe, luckily, because severe sleep apnea you can die from that because it's
Right.
like when you're storing bad enough or I love sleeping on my back, but without a CPAP, it's like I'm choking myself. And the more oxygen you get deprived in your sleep, it's just less oxygen that's going to your brain. So over time, that can cause, besides being groggy and not being alert, over time that can be fatal to functions of your brain.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's huge. That's been huge for me. And then normally at our Marine unit here, we have Normatec, kind of the inflatable
Oh
for
yeah.
leg and arms. Well, yeah, those are expensive. I mean, if you want to get a kit of those, it's like 800-900 bucks American. So that's kind of a so if you could find a place for that. I've never really done a lot of cold baths. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of a bitch when it comes to that. Like I, I would be down to do it, but it's just like who wants you've seen Thor jump in the cold baths in Iceland, and I'm just like, dude, I don't know, man. That seems pretty crazy. And then cryotherapy, I've tried that once. That was a unique experience. Once again, a lot of these things you don't really. It could just be placebo. Who knows if it truly works? But if you believe it works, it's going to work to some extent. Um, but
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And one last thing is, I just got it's called body tempering, and the Chris Duff and his Kabuki strength brand, they have body tempering wheels. So it's like, it's basically like an object. It's a roller made out of like not steel, but they're like 50 to 60 pounds, and they have sleeves inside, so you can put more weight inside. And I've been using it to roll out my legs and back because once you have enough muscle and you're big enough, just rolling on a foam roller isn't really going to do much for you. I still use a foam roller to warm up and kind of open up slightly, but when I'm really beat up, and then there's massage therapy, but I like just having someone roll. I load it up to like 100 pounds and having someone dig into my legs and other areas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for that it's especially the kit that Kabuki do is really good, and he's a little bit more specific, obviously, to the strength stuff because, like you say, at a certain point, foam rollers aren't gonna do as much. And it's interesting, you mentioned a couple of those recovery strategies, like the sound. Big and fancy, but it could just be a placebo if you do something else like stretching or whatever else. If you feel better after it, I think that's the main thing. Just touching on the sleep side of things, because I didn't know all that what you were mentioning there. Is that something that's been a relatively new thing that you've done? What kind of made you go and look at that?
I think probably I'd say the last year and a half, I've noticed a depreciation in my sleep quality. And I kept, brushing it off to maybe stress from my job, I don't know, anxiety, stuff like that. But it just became so prevalent no matter what I did. I pounds equal. I tried to go to bed earlier and it didn't matter. Um, it didn't matter. I just wake up feeling groggy. And then I had a friend, a Marine Corps friend, who also he had a CPAP, and he told me how it helped him. So I thought, okay, I'll just go do a sleep study. And for those who don't know, a sleep study, you stay overnight at a hospital. They hook up like 30, 40 different wires for your head, like over
Oh
your
wow.
body. Yeah, it's almost the joke is like you would probably fail this test regardless if you had sleep apnea or not. Because who's gonna comfortably go to sleep when you have like
Yeah.
wires literally covered in your body? But yeah, but and it came back, and obviously I knew going in I would at least snored, but they said it's like 12 or 14 times an hour I like lose my breath and choke. So that's obviously a big enough deal to where now the problem is it took 3 to 4 months because military it can take a while to get things.
Yeah.
But yeah, having CPAP it took a few weeks to get used to having a mask. I mean, it's at first it's so uncomfortable, and even sometimes in my sleep I'll wake up, at 2, 3 a.m. and then I'll take it off subconsciously because I'm almost half asleep, and
Yeah.
it's like when you wake up and kind of lose your breath for a second, it just kind of makes me disoriented. So then I unknowingly kind of take it off and go back to sleep, and I'll wake up and the mask isn't even on me, and I'll be like, oh damn it, like so. But even if I only have it on a few hours a night, that's still a few hours I'm getting proper oxygen, not losing my breath.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that because I really think that once you're getting to your maximal potential, stuff like that really, I'm not saying it wouldn't matter regardless, but a CPAP, I mean, especially for a athlete who's bigger or just, oh, and another thing too is like when I did the CPAP, it lowered my blood pressure because that's another thing I forgot to mention earlier. Like if you're constantly losing oxygen in your sleep, that's going to increase your blood pressure because obviously when you think about having an accrued debt of oxygen, that'll for various reasons that's going to raise your blood pressure. So I was starting to get relative, not horrible, but like 120, 130 over 60, 70. I don't remember the exact numbers, but still though, you don't want to wait till it gets really bad to try to address it.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, that's something that really blew my mind. I'm like, wow, my blood pressure it went down considerably ever since I've gotten a CPAP, and you notice it too because you breathe better. You don't lose your breath going up a flight of stairs as much.
Yeah.
Like
So you've noticed a sort of a noticeable difference then in recovery with that.
yeah, just health and overall well being. Like I said, even if I wasn't working out, just like I said, just the better mental clarity. I mean, and when you're groggy and just kind of dragging your feet all the time, how productive are you really going to be throughout a day? You're just
Yeah.
kind of like living like before I got a CPAP, it was almost like I was just kind of like a zombie. And once I got off work or once I had the opportunity, I just napped for an hour just to try to do something to try to keep me going because I couldn't go 4 6 hours after I woke up without taking a nap
Right.
either in a vehicle. Now I never got so bad where I was like falling asleep at the wheel,
Yeah.
but it's like when you can't even function for more than 6 8 hours without needing to take a nap, like that's probably a sign you
Yeah,
need some help.
yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of a nap, but maybe just more out of laziness rather than anything else. With
Yeah.
that, because obviously, in terms of getting your training in and being in the military and the routine with it as well. How do you kind of manage your nutrition around that and getting your training in? Do you kind of have to be adaptable with that, or do you kind of have still try and stick to certain times with that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that kind of sucks, because sometimes, I mean, in military, you can have a set schedule, but then it can fix and fluctuate at various moments. So as of right now, I mean, I've always kind of done this in various ways, but I'm doing the vertical diet. I mean, for years I've eaten predominantly red meat and rice, but the vertical diet is kind of a spin, a few extra bells and whistles with that. So just, veggies is mainly spinach, bell pepper, and carrots in the vertical diet. There's other options, but they give you options to what to stick to. And then for breakfast, I eat a couple whole eggs, liquid egg whites, rice, spinach, and then so the various things like orange juice throughout the day and cranberry juice, just helping you get potassium and magnesium. Because what Stan Efferding told me was that's a good way to manage blood pressure as well. Is like salt is not the enemy. It's just that a lot of things that are high in salt, are fried, obviously if something's fried and super processed, it's already bad for you. It's just the icing on the cake is it has a fuck ton of salt in it. But there's been studies, I mean, up to like 8 to 10 grams of salt have been administered to people, but with a proper diet, I mean, that alone isn't going to blow your blood pressure through the roof. But and it's through supplementation as well, but having your potassium and magnesium in taking enough of those naturally as well, that's also help with blood pressure. So the vertical diet's pretty easy to follow. It's not really a strict diet per se, because like I said, I love red meat. I've never had a problem. Any kind of red meat, it could be venison, steak. Most of the time I eat ground beef, like 85-90% lean. It's one of those things where you're kind of following those nutrient gaps you need as an athlete, but not super strict. And sometimes I can't follow the diet. I have like a meal replacement, like I said, that's not ideal, but sometimes once a day I'll have to go for a meal. Most of the time, I'm not a mass gainer because I don't like mass gainers because they have a ton of carbs, but it's usually like 20 to 30 grams of protein per 3-4 scoops.
Yeah.
So then you got to add peanut butter or other alternatives just to get enough protein from a mass gainer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to speak to Stan Efferding on the podcast, and he explained really well about the vertical diet. I think everyone thinks, especially when you say diet, it's got to be really strict and there's no flexibility. Whereas actually, especially reading the book as well, there's quite a couple of options in there, which is helpful, I think, rather than feeling as though you have to be you've got to be really strict. Obviously, at the start, I mentioned about your deadlift at the American Pro. Kind of wanted to touch on that. How was kind of the prep heading into that competition? How was the day? What was that like? Have things settled down from there?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting prep. So I don't know. Everybody, you always want that prep where everything goes right, but there's always something maybe one day there'll be a prep where it's like you don't tweak something, you're just confident the whole time. But the reality is throughout prep, you're going to have points when you doubt yourself, at least in my opinion. But then it's your ability to overcome the adversity or to subjectively see why. That's the thing that I've improved on most is I'm not fretting about a horrible workout, right? Like if I shit the bed on deads or squat, miss my top set, or I just underperformed, I just think about all the factors that led up to that, right? Maybe a lack of sleep, nutrition wasn't on point, hydration. And during this prep, it started off really great. I mean, the first 6 weeks of prep were great. I was obviously starting out with some frequency. I was hitting rep PRs. I mean, on deadlift, especially, it was 880 I did 400 kilos for 4 or 5 reps. It was 4 or 5 reps. I don't remember. 4 or 5 reps. And that was a huge PR. So I was definitely on the right path. But then 6 weeks out, I just started tearing. Part of it was like the change in the seasons because the meet was in July, and I think I might have had allergies or something to affect my skin because I was really starting to dry out in my hands,
Right.
but even all over my body, I was just starting to flake, and I was like, why am I drying up everywhere? Yeah. This was weird. So I was really coming across. It was mainly the thumb. Here, I never really tear here. Most of the time, it's usually just around the thumb. Yeah. So, and the thing about me is for 3-4 years, I never used straps. So I really learned how to do hook grip. Got really comfortable with hook grip. And I use straps now because especially on deadlift bars, you can't do excess. Even if your hook grip's good, doing set to 7, it just doesn't. There's no need to do that. But with straps, it's almost like the heaviest strap pull I've ever done is 920, and I've done over 1,000 without straps. So it's just my top sets are always without straps. Usually my top set varies 1 to 3 reps. I usually do a top set 1 to 3 reps, and I have 3 back downs, which are more volume, and I do those with straps. But when my hands started tearing, I had to use straps all the time. And I don't know, I've tried figure 8 straps. I mean, I've tried every kind of strap, but none of them, it's almost like I'm gripping the bar too much. Like when I wear straps, it's like I tend to want to flex my hand too much, which in turn makes me want to bend my elbows. And it just feels really weird. Like, cause I'm worried about the strap coming undone. Yeah. So with hook grip, I'm more relaxed in my hand. But with straps, it's like I'm like clenched. I subconsciously am clenching more. So a lot of my top sets just, didn't really move great, or I failed them. And my heaviest lift to prep, luckily 2 weeks out, I just in time, my hands started recovering. I pulled 1,003. That was my heaviest deadlift during the whole prep. I actually did it earlier in prep, but I wanted to do more, but that was kind of, it is what it was at that point.
Yeah.
But one thing I've learned even in past preps is like with deadlift, especially where I'm at, like I can't, and obviously it's no shit, you're not going to max out, but my plan was to open with, I wanted to chip my all time on the opener of 970. So I opened with 982. And then I knew I was going to chip my 1,025 on the second. So I went like 1,031. And then from there, I didn't know what I was going to do. It was just going to be based off a feel. But it's like I did 70 pounds more at a meet than I did in training. And usually it's 4 to 5%, I'd say. I do more in a competition than I do in training. So I account for that because you can't, like I said, push a squat and deadlift as you get into a prep. You got to be smart. Like when I pulled 1,000, it was probably like an RP8. So I was like, okay, this definitely wasn't that strenuous, but I'm not going to go heavier because that's just going to tax my CNS even further, And that's a lot of the great deadlifters of the past. I've noticed that too. A lot of deadlifters, mainly the conventional ones, they used to deadlift every 2 to 3 weeks because they accounted for the CNS fatigue that much,
Yeah. And what are you usually like after a competition, or what were you like after this competition? Do you usually take a little bit of time off, or what's your usual plan?
Yeah, I'm pretty wrecked. Like that's the thing, is like that's why I usually go for it in some way, because you're always gonna feel that it's usually like an hour or two after the meet, your CNS just nose dives, and then I usually don't work out for 7 to 10 days. Then I'll slowly work back into it. And it depends too, because for instance, next year I have a meet in March, and then I'm gonna do the pro. I'm gonna do the pro again, and this time the pro is in late October. It's around Halloween weekend, and I mean I want to do the pro again because it was such a good meet. In terms of now, I do want to go overseas in the future, compete in other places, but until I get out of the Marines, that's just not.
Yeah.
It's so hard to like put in foreign leave in the military. You got to jump through hoops and stuff, and plus it just wouldn't be ideal. But in the future, I'd love to compete overseas. But in America right now, I think the pro is the biggest in terms of. I mean, people were arguing the prize money compared to some other meets. It wasn't that great, but they put so much money into the venue. I mean, we had it was at kind of it used to be a movie theater, then it got revamped into like a professional sports arena for like semi-pro wrestling and other things. So it just had perfect, open lights and stage and stuff. It was the most professional feeling meet I've ever done. Like we had a 2,000 square foot room just for warming up. It was a separate room, and then you like go down and you're literally walking in a movie theater. So the aisles are, I mean, it was so cool. And then the live stream, I didn't see the live stream during the meet, but I felt like the live stream was pretty good, and just the environment. There was almost up to 1,000 people there at one time, which was really cool. I mean, I've never competed at a meet that big, so I think they're trying to make it more for the athletes, And I mean, prize money does matter, but unless you're at the very top, let's be honest, like the top 2 or 3, Wilkes, Dots, whatever, they're going to win all the money. But the rest of the people, you still want to give them a great experience, Especially a lot of these people, they're paying out of pocket and stuff. So I believe it's like it makes sense to want to make it. The production of a meet is important to me too, Like bringing value to all the people there. I mean, the strobe lights and stuff is cool, but then I loved third deadlifts. We walked out from the red carpet from the back onto the platform. Just little touches like that. And then in the warm up room and in multiple places, they had huge monitors, showing the live stream, showing the flights and the orders. So you were never not in the dark. Like at a normal meet, it's like you're trying to figure out, oh, what flight are they on? Oh, are they in seconds, thirds? Like that's normally pretty hard to figure out. But at this meet, I mean, you can look on your phone. You could go in 2 or 3 different rooms. And you'll see the lineup has its ongoing. So it was just the most stress-free meet. And I knew a lot of people there, because I've been going to a few big meets now. So it was a great time. And I think I definitely want to do that again. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely. I think with that as well, from a spectator's point of view, I know powerlifting isn't always sometimes compared to football or rugby or basketball, as a spectacle. So having events like that gets a lot more buy-in for people watching it, which might then increase the prize money and those sorts of things. So yeah, as a spectacle, it's good to watch. Obviously you've touched on in a bit of an off season now, and competitions next year. What have you set your own goals for next year, or some targets? What can we expect to see?
I mean, the one thing I definitely I want to break my first all-time total, because that's something. I mean, since like 2018, it was pretty. I'm sorry, there's some freaking gnats around here.
Oh.
Yeah, Marine Barracks, man, they're not the cleanest places. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I still want to push the deadlift and I mean, the people keep asking 500, and my thing is like, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about it, but I'm not. I'm not gonna like. I'm just gonna treat these meet preps the same and just try to slowly build better, get a few PRs here and there, and see where it goes. Because in my opinion, I mean, I've seen this in the sport for years, where I think there's a science actually. It's like concrete numbers like 100, 200, 300, 400. It's like more of a mental block, right? Like 499 is not a big deal, but 500 is, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
monumentous. So I'm not trying to let the whole 500 thing, like, I'm just going to get better. And I think last year, I mean, so that tells me, okay, I don't need to like, I don't need to go above and beyond of what I'm doing. I just need to keep what I'm doing. I have a pretty good formula with how I'm training and improving on deads. So, and I'm gonna compete twice this year. So if it's there in March, maybe. If not, hopefully do it at the pro. But I'm confident I will, because especially the conventional work, I really feel it's going to pay dividends, as I progress to this next prep. But breaking the first total would be cool, because that's something I never thought I'd do. And then people are still going to say, oh, well, his deadlift is still like, I don't know, 60 whatever percent. But a total is a total, right? It doesn't. The sum of three parts is the same, regardless if it's, your squats this, your bench this, your deadlift this. Like, some people are more even. Some people are really good squat and deadlift, and their bench is in the middle. So, but yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, I'll be more excited for that than deadlift, honestly, because that would be a way bigger deal to me. Because I want to start competing for totals at big meets, and I just want to set the tone and do that. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, definitely, and it'll be exciting to
And
see.
yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, as for numbers, I mean, my next meet, probably squat like 782, 780. This all depends, like I said, as the prep progresses, and then 474 ish. And then, like I said, on deads, it's all going to be about whatever my heaviest deadlift is. It'll probably be within 20 to 30 pounds of my opener. That's normally my like. It's a weird way to do it, but since I kind of hold back in training, I don't recommend that to most people. But it's because, since I know through trial and error, I pull 4 to 5% more than me, just because the adrenaline, the fight or flight, and coming in with my CS fresh. It's like if my heaviest is 1,020 during prep, I'll probably open with like 990, 1,000, etc. So that's kind of the benchmark of what I'm expecting to do. Like I said, for all I know, it could be a crazier prep or could be better. Yeah, we'll just wait and see. I'm gonna start posting more, but it's like I'm deep in the off season, and I'm doing the similar weights for high reps, and it's just like, and people tell me, oh, post it, I want to see it, but then it, not that I care about the views, but I'm like, okay, no one cares if I'm doing 330 for set to 8 on bench. It's just not like that appealing.
Yeah. No, I think it goes kind of full circle to what we spoke about at the start, in terms of having that strategy. What works for you. And it obviously is working, because, you're having really good, competitions and still progressing from there. So yeah, I think it'll be exciting to see. Thanks a lot, Danny, for taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you today. I was looking forward to this podcast when we set it up. The last question that I like to ask, though, from everything that we've chatted about there in terms of recovery, in terms of training and meet prep, for everyone listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Man, you got some good questions. I'm not gonna lie. Not that I wasn't prepared, but it's definitely very thought provoking because I could go one of a multitude of ways with this. I would say probably the most important thing is getting to the point where you can figure out, like I kind of stated previously earlier, like if you're not feeling the best, just like don't go completely off the gas, but because you're only as good as what you can recover from, right? So your sleep and all this can be on point, but if you're always overshooting and training, that's also why I believe in more of a. So this is how I see it. Normally, my top sets normally around an R. I don't know. I hate to use RP, but RP like 6 to 7, because I know if I go above RP 8, that's a lot. Whether it's a single or a rep set, that's a lot of CNS fatigue to recover from. So I always tries to stay in that like pocket, if you will, like exertion of like 6 to 7 RP, or I guess like having a few reps in the tank. Because I've learned, like I said, you could have a great workout and overshoot it, but then for 2 weeks, if you're recovering from what you did that day, that in my opinion, you want to keep building on each week. So knowing your body and knowing when to like I said, depending on the day, if you're fatigued, if things aren't going to move the way they should, just don't. If you got to drop 50 pounds, but you're still, like I said, maintaining that RPE, that to me is a better deal than if you still try to do the weight anyway, completely tax yourself, and then the next 3 to 5 days, it's going to affect your other workouts. So I'd say just have consistency in your training in terms of like monitoring your intensity. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's. But like I said, though, the CPAP and all the other stuff, that stuff is really crucial. I mean, because when you look at it with powerlifters, the best ones are normally the ones who stay the healthy the longest, or they're at least healthy enough. Like I said, you're going to tweak muscles here and there because when you're pushing your body to the limit. But that's one thing I've learned is like, even if I have 2 bad workouts, as long as I'm still healthy and then I recover, that's better than if I just don't feel great and then I end up tweaking something and then it's 4 to 6 weeks of like, you're in limbo, not really doing anything, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a really good point to finish on, because I think people, or there can be a mindset that they're just thinking about that meet that's coming up rather than thinking that
That one,
strength
yeah,
is.
that one
Yeah,
workout. Or
absolutely. It's, strength is long term. You can still get stronger rather than always stopping and starting if you get an injury. So no, I thought that was a really good take home point there. For anyone listening who might have any questions about what we've chatted about, see the training footage that you put out there, where can people reach you or find the content that you put out there?
yeah, so on Instagram, God, I don't look at it that often, but I think my Instagram handle's Dan Griggs, Dan_Griggs.
Yeah.
It used to be something else, but then a year ago I changed it because someone told me it sounded catchier and it helped me with traction. So yeah, and I don't know much about the algorithm to be honest. So Dan_Griggs for Instagram, and then on YouTube, I keep hinting at this, but it's just tough because of my work and stuff. But I want to start, especially for this prep, making a video every week or two, like documenting training, and I'll talk about, I guess, philosophy and what I'm thinking about. So on YouTube, I think my YouTube is just type in Danny Grigsby and it'll come up as one of the first things. But YouTube should be in the works very soon. Luckily, I have a videographer who's pretty local now who can help me with editing, because I can do the raw footage, but it's like knowing how to splice it together and kind of present it better, because I can just put raw footage on there, but it's just not gonna flow very well, you know.
Yeah,
So yeah,
definitely.
hopefully YouTube. I'll start posting on YouTube because that's, it's more than anything. It's like, regardless if I ever blow up and you can monetize it, which is great, but then 10, 20 years ago, 10, 20 years from now, I can look back and see, oh, this is how I felt during this time. Getting to see kind of like a training log, and it's documented, online. So
Yeah, definitely. That'll be cool. Yeah, thanks a lot, Danny, for taking the time to jump on. Like I say, I really appreciate you taking the time, and really enjoyed chatting with you today. So thanks again. Thanks to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.